the economics are very attractive. I mean, it's been interesting to watch some other new technologies in recent years, like cell phones. India today has more cell phones than toilets. There's a story there. And I haven't tried to write that story, but I sense that it's an interesting dynamic that has led to this situation. And we need to think about the reasons why and how that happened. It also indicates what the potentials are when you have the right combination of technologies and incentives, even if the incentives are personally driven. But people in India and increasingly in sub-Saharan Africa are figuring out how to get cell phones, and they're not free, and it become a driver in many ways. So again, I think we have to look at these things not in terms of the mindset that got us into this situation, but in terms of the kind of thinking that will get us out of it. And I use this as just one example of how we need to rethink things.
Final thing then, you highlight both peak oil and peak water, peak grain. You can talk about peak everything. I mean, you can add mineral resources or whatever you want. Is the concept of growth at all sustainable in the end?
I don't know what growth is. So I find it difficult to talk about growth or no growth or degrowth or whatever. I mean, we have an enormous oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico now, and it's going to increase our GNP because there's a massive effort expending all sorts of money. The Somali pirates have led to the location of naval units from 17 countries. 17 countries, modern warships, destroyers, airborne helicopters, the whole complex. I mean, that's increasing someone's GNP who, supplies these ships and builds the ships and all these things, and I'm not sure, I would think of it as growth, either of these cases. So I don't know what growth is. And I don't think economists do either, unfortunately. They have a system of data collection that they say represents growth. I'm not so sure. I think what we need to focus on is how do we satisfy basic human needs, and it's food security, it's at least rudimentary health care, it's at least a primary school education, enough education and literacy so people can tap into modern technologies, and an environment in which humans can unfold and where there's the potential for development. If we can create that environment, thank you very much.
Thank you.
If we can create that environment, then I think we'll be successful. Whether it's called growth or non-growth or whatever.
Yes. Last question.
Yeah. You say we can harvest enough energy more energy than we could ever think of today, and mostly from sun and thermal and wind. But what will happen if we get that amount of energy? What will humankind do with the world if you look at what we do today with the amount of energy we have now?
I talked about the energy transition. There's also a chapter in Plan B on raising energy efficiency, which indicates that we can have a far better life in the future with far less energy, regardless of where it comes from, than we do today. And we use the lighting as an example. In this room, we have a combination of compact fluorescence and incandescence. In my room upstairs, in the hotel across the street, all the light bulbs in my room are incandescent. But in the lobby in front of the elevator, they're compact fluorescent. So So the hotel owners obviously know these two technologies exist. But the point is, if we go from incandescence to compact fluorescence, we reduce electricity use 70%. If we go from incandescence to LEDs combined with light sensors that turn lights off when there's no one in a room, light sensors that adjust lighting intensity depending on the amount of daylight available. I mean, in my office, when I turn on the light, I get the same amount of light whether it's midday or midnight. The system doesn't distinguish. I mean, when you think about it, it's a pretty crude system. And if you combine these sensor technologies with LEDs, then we're cutting electricity use by 90%. Worldwide, going from where we are today to that sort of thing would enable us to close 705 coal-fired power plants out of 2,300 coal-fired power plants. Just that alone. So efficiency has an important role to play. And then when we think, for example, of electrification of the transport sector, we're looking at some quantum jumps. Engineers know, and some others also know, that an electric motor is 3 times as efficient as an internal combustion engine. I mean, internal combustion engines produce mostly heat, not power, mostly heat. In fact, they produce so much heat, we have to have a cooling system to keep them from overheating and self-destructing. I mean, you don't have to be a physicist to know that that's not a very efficient system. So just going from internal combustion to electric motors, to going to light rail, to high-speed intercity rail, and electric cars, plug-in hybrid cars, we dramatically reduce energy use, and by turning to electricity produced from renewable sources, we've taken carbon largely out of the transportation system.
Well,
Thank you very much.
thank you all.